welcome back, our stellar selling circular economists. If we just roll with the alliterative nature of this. Again, welcome back to another episode in our new season. Garr Pundit here with always
Sabira Lakhani.
Boom. I'm the CEO of a company called Loop Layer, where we are rethinking, reimagining, remanufacturing, and how we generate revenue from remanufacturing and circular manufacturing. Sabira, please tell the people who you are.
I'm the Senior Director of Product at Reaply. We sell enterprise technology for organizations to track what they've purchased so that they can make the smartest decision about how to maximize the use of what they've purchased.
So in all, between the two of us, we're really completing that circle. We are trying to just find every way that we can maximize the utility, take things apart, build them back together, sell them again, and reuse them again all around. Well, as we are trying our new format here in season 2, I think it's up to me to talk about something new, to educate the audience,
teach me something,
try to teach you something new, which can sometimes be a challenge for us. Not to say we know everything, but we're plugged in. We know what's going on. On this one, it's also fairly topical. So what I actually wanted to talk about was and this plays into Theo, the rise of the automotive remanufacturing, and how automotive companies are fully embracing remanufacturing. And you've got various companies now around the world that are looking at how can we start to rethink not only the design components of our vehicles, but then also the ecosystem of which we're building these vehicles. Now, I say ecosystem, yes, that can call to mind our natural systems, our forests, our river, all of those, the oceans. What's great about these types of ecosystems in the tech world that we live in is just as much as we can think of them as being natural and being environmentally friendly, well, we're also, each of these companies are now trying to do the Apple ecosystem, do the Google ecosystem, where how do you actually create a product? How do you build a circular economy around capturing consumers and providing them value throughout the life cycle of that consumer, throughout the life cycle of that product? And so that's how we can really continue to think about ecosystems, how do we get a consumer like you or me, someone who's going to buy a product, but ultimately someone also who's going to maybe want to further invest in that product so that we're not getting rid of it before its end of the life cycle, or if we're continually investing in this product, and we're going to use cars as an example today, that if we're continually investing in our vehicles, and maybe this vehicle never will have an end of life, maybe we can build a car that can then be continually replacing different modular components where this is sort of the goal that we can be built into this ecosystem and we're never going to leave. And one of those is actually a part of, I'm going to talk about two companies. One is Stellantis, and some of our users might know Stellantis, some of them may not. But Stellantis is, I'm going to actually quickly look this up because I exited out of the browser, which is they are the owners of various subsidiaries and brands. So Alfa Romeo, Chrysler, Dodge, Fiat, Jeep, Maserati, Peugeot, if some people know that brand, but also Ram. And so this is a massive car company that, as of November, announced that they were actually going to build their first circular economy hub in Italy. And this hub is going to be dedicated towards actually the exploration, not necessarily the building of these cars just yet, but the exploration of how do we start to redesign and rethink what a car could be if we had circularity in mind. And this is all out of a page in, I'm going to share my screen now, of how do we, I'm going to do this live.
You can do it.
No, I'm not.
You got blocked.
Here we go. No, I've got it. There we go. So actually, this is going to be all of part of their goals for their new sales goals. And so they've got a Dare Forward goal by being carbon net zero by 2038. And Stellantis is actually going to start pursuing this by thinking about circular product offerings within all of their subsidiaries. I hope to maybe go pay homage, to go do a pilgrimage to such a site in Italy at some point. That would be so cool to see a circular hub in motion and thinking about redesigns. This is Stellantis's update, and this is where they're trying to reduce their carbon footprint by 50% by 2030. Again, by dealing with the digital revolution as well, and in tech, and then ultimately in the value that they're creating is really then building out each of these subsidiaries and adding value to each of their own P&Ls. And so ultimately they want to build that ecosystem across their brands and across their client portfolio. Now, on the other hand, I think, well, this is actually what they're building. This is what is the entrance to their circular economy hub. But this is where we get to pivot, because we actually have a design of a car, not by Stellantis, but actually by BMW. And this is BMW's circular car, where they're going to be rethinking the car at a component level of not only what is made to go in these cars and how it's designed, but also how it actually can be made to be more modular, how they can understand at a technology level everything that goes into this car, so that you can start to track these components and track these materials in a much more transparent way. You've got, this was an interesting seating choice, frankly, that I thought, because we can look at some of these fabrics and be like, oh, that seems like that might be a little harder to recycle. But this is what they went for their first design, and it looks cool. Any reactions here?
It looks futuristic, but also 70s at the same time.
That's a good call out. Yeah, it does. Yes. Futuristic yet comforting to an older generation, where they're like, oh, I'm not too intimidated by this. Yeah.
I think what I'm noticing is, I guess, like, I don't see a lot of plastic, which I see in a lot of vehicles. Like, I was a first-time car buyer this year. I went with the Toyota RAV4 hybrid, and
nice.
Yeah, and it was cool, but there's a lot of parts and pieces in the car. So what I'm noticing here is this kind of like an absence of that. It looks like you really just have like seats. I mean, we can't really see the dashboard here, but I imagine that it looks a little bit like one panel-ish.
Right,
yeah. Oh, there it is. Oh, and I was spot on.
Spot on.
So, but like the thing I would think about is like, what's holding this together? Is it glue? And I know glue makes things harder to recycle. What kind of material makeup is the stuff itself? Like, one of the things that we know from the recycling industry is that it's hard to aggregate like with like material. So like, even though you could take a component out of this and put a new component in, which is super cool, it'll make the car more circular itself. But then the question I would have is, okay, well, what's happening to that old component after it gets repaired and reused? What is the material makeup? And then the other cool thing, that was a question mark for me. And then the other cool thing I noticed, actually, if you go back to the previous image, is the stitching. Like, it's so noticeable that the fabric is stitched on. So my guess is like you're going to reupholster that.
Yeah, that's a good call out, because again, this is where it comes down to, how are you stitching, not gluing? How are you not affixing, but bolting? And kind of the call out here that I was really curious about is, I actually looked at this and thought similarly to you. It was like, oh, okay, they're going very natural materials potentially. It does actually look like it's fairly simple in application and how things are put together. And then this came through and I was like, well, what type of futuristic plastic is that?
Yeah.
And why are they doing that? I mean, the odds that this is what this will look like are very low. But still, it even from that component, it looks like, oh, the natural woods, and I know they're going futuristic, but the acrylic or whatever this is going to be complicating to that circularity. And actually, one good example that I actually really enjoyed feeling for the first time is I was riding in a Rubicon a pickup truck, and they had an all natural wood finish interior, and that was actually I enjoyed that thoroughly. It was really cool to be in that type of textured environment of sort of those natural woods. And so I imagine that's probably where this will land, is somewhere in there. But even if what's interesting about the sides too is if you look at, it's all sort of a similar composite. And so maybe there's something to that too, where there's going to be a recycled plastic that they use. And I kind of like the texture, but maybe that's where their head's at, is thinking about these recycled plastics. And so
the other thing, not about like the physical nature of the circular car, but I've heard a Toyota person just kind of postulate about how in the future, like, we won't own cars, like they will be owned by the manufacturer, and there will be more services similar to Uber. When you have more self-driving cars, like, you're just paying for the usage of the vehicle from the point where it comes to get you to where you're going, and like the network of cars will just kind of be like on autopilot, running all the time with last mile kind of end-to-end service. And that's also cool because you have like the circular nature, materialistic and composition oriented circular car, but then also the use of that car could also be very shared and networked in a way that we haven't before. Right now, my car is sitting in the lot doing nothing while I'm here. So the maximum utility is just like totally far away. It's not really achievable right now.
Well, and that's even, I mean, to get all sort of macro capitalism with that, I mean, that speaks to our sense of ownership, again, that we've always talked about, that we've even talked about in previous episodes, of how that's going to change. But the sense too of how are you maximizing the revenue generating potential of a vehicle. And we've seen car sharing programs. I mean, that's where Turo comes into play, of trying to maximize you being able to rent out your vehicle to others who might want to use that vehicle. And I bet the name of their game is all about decreasing the amount of risk associated with your vehicle so that you feel comfortable to do that. And then ultimately too, maybe someday there will be a car company in which they don't sell cars. That, and I'm sure even Uber looked into this, of Uber would be the closest one to manufacture their own vehicles and just manage their own fleet, and then lease that out on a per minute basis, which is essentially what you do when you're renting an Uber, and then you're just paying that fee. So the future is gonna come at some point with that, and there will be a company that will take a full stab at that, and maybe it will be one of these manufacturers, and they'll, who knows, maybe we'll speak of a future acquisition here where Stellantis acquires Uber, and now they have this full fleet. And yes, exactly. So get crazy
full
with
driverless fleet.
Full driverless fleet of a vehicle that's owned by the corporation that made it. Yes. So dystopian or future hope, I don't know in that. So that's ultimately up to us to decide in many, many other years on this podcast. But that all brings us to what we're talking about here today with Theo and our guest. And we actually get to talk to Theo Lamperis, who is working at BBB Industries. And BBB is all about actually making the remanufacturing future happen with their remanufacturing facilities. And they're a third-party operation. And so what was your general impression, that we can both leave the guests, that our audience with listening, what they can expect, and then how are you sort of again excited about what BBB had to offer?
Yeah, I think I loved that I learned that the automotive industry has an existing remanufacturing player that has a long history before the circular economy was even part of our vocabulary. So somebody was innovative and kind of jumped at the economic opportunity to basically like harvest underutilized parts and put them back to work. And that's That's great. And I really appreciated his point of view on how we have to establish relationships with many players to make remanufacturing possible. So like the element of human networking is
Yes.
still required. And yeah.
It's a great chat with Theo. I hope you all enjoy it. We started off with how I met Theo, which is we met at the World Remanufacturing Conference not too long ago, and Theo did a great job. Great introduction in his speech, mixed with humor and but also some facts about the industry. And so that's actually where we picked this up off in terms of the interview. And I hope you all enjoy. If you have any questions, or would you like to be introduced to Theo or any of our other guests, please reach out to us. Probably the easiest way is on LinkedIn. Reach out to us. We're happy to reach back out and connect more of our community members. And again, so thank you for listening, and we look forward to interacting you further on any of these digital platforms like Apple and Spotify and even YouTube. So leave some comments, and we're happy to get back to you. Enjoyed this interview with Theo Lamperis of BBB Industries. I'll sing your praises, Theo. Theo did a very great job of that at the conference that we were at, and I thought it was one of the better ones, Theo. To be honest, I think there was an appropriate amount of sprinkle of humor in there that you did very well. So excellent.
Which conference?
Yes, Theo, go ahead. Tell her about the conference.
So Garr and I attended the World Remanufacturers Conference, which is a grouping of remanufacturers across the globe. We had a gentleman flying from Australia, and then some automotive gentlemen from Germany as well. And it's part of the Remanufacturers Industry Council, and also sponsored by the Golisano Institute for Sustainability up near you in Rochester, New York, excuse me.
Very cool.
It just brings all the remanufacturers across the globe together, and I was lucky enough to be able to be on stage.
So can I assume that you're a remanufacturer?
You're right on the dot.
Yeah, we can jump right into that.
Score.
With that, tell us about BBB.
Sure.
This is where we can go in for the layperson. We can start high level, what the industry is, and then how you all have not only taken that to the next level, you can even get into what the future is, and then Sabira and I can piece that apart and dive into the details.
Okay, sounds good. So BBB Industries has been working since 1987, and we are a remanufacturer. We like to use the term sustainable manufacturer, but I'll get into that a bit later. What a remanufacturer does is it takes a product that is broken or worn and will completely disassemble it. It will clean all the parts, replace the 10 to 20% of the product that's broken, reassemble it, clean it, test it back to the original specifications that it was sold out as new, and return it to customer on the road. And in our specific industry, the automotive, there's the original equipment manufacturer. Those big names that you see driving along the road, the big dealerships that sell new cars. Well, quite frequently, you have to fix a part on your car, whether it be an alternator, starter, brake caliper, something of the sorts. So what will happen is you'll go to your local dealership, your local automotive gentleman who's fixing your car, and they'll take the broken one and they'll put a new one on, and they'll take that broken one and send it to BBB Industries, where we will remanufacture it. And so we've been doing this since 1987. It started with alternators, starters.
So I got to have my first interruption here.
Sure.
It won't be my last here, Theo, which is you said something that was very quickly. You went into they send it back to us.
Yes.
And that's something I know Sabira will clue in. It is like, why do they send it back to you? How do they send it back to you? We can talk about the processes now in a little bit detail of what's that like and why is that important of that send back mechanism?
Very good. So, of course, we're talking about circular economy, and you can only have a circular economy if you have some sort of material to remanufacture or to fix or to be in a circular state. And so our lever to do that is what we call a core charge. So when you go and you buy a product, you have the choice between a new product, say a new alternator or a new starter that goes to your vehicle, or a remanufactured product that goes to your vehicle. And when you buy that product, you pay a little bit extra. You pay a little extra, and that extra is called a core charge. And you use that product, and when you return that product that's broken, you get that back. And so it's an incentive base to get the product back into the hands of the person that sold it to you. And now we have really good relationships with our customers where we know exactly who to go to source our worn and broken content that is used as fodder for our finished goods. So that's how the reverse logistics works on that part.
I have so many questions. I'm very excited. Okay, so we have a deposit system. Very cool. Who is the payer in the world of automotive, which I have not replaced any of these parts in my car before? Is it the gentleman who's fixing the car and then he passes that core charge on to the end customer in some way? Is the end user making that decision? Who's actually deciding to participate in this circular activity?
Okay, that's a really good question. So you can go, say your Sabira is driving down the road and there's a check engine light that comes on. She takes it to her local mechanic shop and he says, "Oh, goodness, you're going to need a new brake caliper." Oh, shoot. Okay. And so then it gives you the option. Okay, here's a brake caliper. You have two choices. You can have a remanufactured caliper, which traditionally is less than a new caliper, so it's more economic for you. Or you could have a new one. Okay. In this instance, let's just say you buy the new one. Foolish, but that's okay. So you buy the new one, and part of that purchase price is that core charge, and you'll see it on the receipt. Okay, part of it, at the maintenance shop, part of it's labor, part of it's the actual product, maybe sometimes it's core charge. Okay, so that core charge is being passed along to you. Now, it will go back to the person you bought it from when it's broken. All right, and they will give you that money. So now that core charge is passed along to the seller. Now, BBB works with our customer to buy core back. Okay, and when we buy it back, we will pay them for that core. Okay, so that's how we bring it back to BBB Industries. So it does get passed along, and all of it is a lever or an incentive to keep that part in the circular economy. And it's very economic based. And Garr will tell you, not until the past 2 to 5 years has sustainability been cool. Mm-hmm. But we've been wearing the sunglasses since 1987. So
yes. Okay, one more question. Oh, sorry.
Nope. One more question. You have all the questions. Go for it, Sabira.
Oh no, now did I forget my question? This is an industry-wide core charge, meaning this is happening on the purchase of all new brake calipers, or is it just some auto mechanics are deciding to offer that as an option?
So core charge is pretty commonplace, and it's very dependent on the rate that the core is returned on its own. I say a core is pretty valuable, and when I say a core, I mean like a broken or worn part. When a core is fairly valuable, maybe the core charge would be a little bit higher to incentivize. Okay, we need those back, so we're going to incentivize the customer to bring it back, incentivize our customer to retain that partnership and bring it back to us. So it's fairly commonplace among the industry. I can't speak to outside automotive or industrial, but at least automotive is very common.
Yeah, it does get a little more rare outside of some of these industries, and that ultimately is my fascination. And just to drive home again, I mean, we're talking starters and alternators, power steering mechanisms, brake calipers, turbochargers. These are very much focused in the automotive. What would you call heavy? The larger is that heavy duty yes. sector. And so this is just to paint the picture for someone who's listening and being like, where do I fit into this? Well, you fit into it if you have a car, and if you're going to get that car serviced, and you have that choice to make, and you're going to make, as Theo put it, the best decision, not the unfortunate decision of buying. But you're buying a remanufactured part. This is where that buying decision actually happens. Now, Theo, can you speak to that's actually one of the decisions that a consumer will make, but that's actually not the only decision being made in the process. You all tend to actually work with those shops and those as a dealer of that product. Can you talk a little bit more about how you all are supplying those vendors or supplying those OEMs even that are original equipment manufacturers? Just if anybody's listening and wondered what acronym, but like, can you talk a little bit more about that distribution network that lives within remanufacturing?
Sure. So there's a manufacturer of a product. Then there's the OEM, or original equipment manufacturer, that buys the product. It gets used, it gets worn, it gets returned to us, hopefully, and then it'll go back to that original equipment manufacturer or another one of our partners, like some of the auto stores that are down the street here. So your question
Can you
is,
not to favor anybody, but can you name an auto part, like, so that people see it and go, oh, that's what they're talking about?
Sure. So there's
Like an O'Reilly?
Yeah, something like that of the source. You'll go and wherever you get your car fixed and you buy parts.
Right.
You can even buy parts online. Some people do that, and they will fix it themselves. We call those independent jobbers. So in your question, once again, is okay, so the customer makes a decision, but also what causes an OEM or one of our partners to decide to be part of a circular economy? That's a really good question, and something that, as a sustainability guy, kind of makes it my job more important. And I'll tell you why. Sustainability has become a very hot topic. Okay. And when I say sustainability, it's a very unknown subject matter. And so what happens when you have a new unknown subject matter? We kind of tie our ideas to one metric. Okay. And then we expand. And that one metric that you always hear about is carbon footprint, carbon emissions, carbon neutral. All of those are all about one thing, and that's carbon emissions. Okay. Carbon emissions is the emissions that a company is responsible for in the working of their operations. So an OEM, like one of those big major automotive manufacturers, has a few carbon emissions. So they have carbon emissions when they turn on their lights in their office. They have carbon emissions when they create a new car. All right. They have carbon emissions. They have to take responsibility for the carbon emissions when Joe Schmo buys a car from them and drives it down the street. They have to take responsibility for that. And so where does BBB fit into this relationship? One of the other categories of carbon emissions they have to take responsibility for is the emissions created when manufacturing their parts and products. Okay. So there's a gentleman at a large OEM who is a purchaser. All right. His name is Brian. And Brian goes and he has to purchase parts to sell to customers like you and me who need to fix their cars. And when he's going to go purchase that group of parts, he needs to buy 100 alternators. Okay, he has a choice between different suppliers of those 100 alternators. And two of the things that he's thinking about when he's making that decision are price. Okay, what's the cheapest I can buy this alternator for? And the second is quality. All right, what supplier can I really rely on for that product? Well, that is old. Those two are an old way of thinking, and the new way of thinking is this third one, carbon emissions of that product. So now Brian is thinking about, well, let's see, new or reman, what happens on price? Well, reman is generally a little bit cheaper, if not more cheaper than new. Two, the quality is the same, if not better than new. And three, we look at the carbon footprint of a circular economy versus new manufacturing. That's going to help us attain our carbon emissions goals. So that's a very roundabout way of saying that BBB and remanufacturers fulfill new needs for OEMs.
I love that. Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Real quickly. No. I just want to get into the mechanics of that operation then. And I know we're a little bit all over the place, but this is kind of the fun of this podcast is we kind of get to poke and prod on different ideas. So, but ultimately I want to break it down because I think I originally interrupted back when you were explaining BBB, but I want the listener to understand, and even whoever is listening or watching this video to understand, what is the process of when you get that part back? You mentioned it briefly if you take it, but you do it. But like, just talk about specifically that there are humans that are taking things apart and then doing activities to those to get them ready back for use. Can you break that down into maybe some stages so that someone that average Joe Schmo on our end of the listeners, or Jen Schmo, whoever's listening, could actually start to really break down what it means to remanufacture something.
Okay,
And
sure.
I also want to
Go ahead.
just like
Please.
the thing to add to that question is, how do you make sure, or what are you doing so that it is equal or better than new?
Okay, very good. So I'll touch on that point as well. So the first step is getting these components or cores back to BBB Industries manufacturing sites. And when we do that, we will have this big bucket, say a big truckload come on in of alternators, starters, brake calipers, turbochargers, steering stuff. And it's just, oh my goodness, we have this big thing of cores. So first you have to do is identify what it is. So what is this? What year, make, model does it go to? Is it rotating electric product? Is it a braking product? Okay, we know this is a rotating electric product. And it's really dirty, and we know it's broken and worn, but we don't know where. So the first thing we're gonna do is clean it with water. Side note, we just installed a water recycling plant, but that's a whole different side note. Clean it with water, and then separate it and understand what was broken on the product. Okay, so we separate it. Okay, this is broken. It's this $2 doohickey that goes in it that caused the entire thing to fail. We don't want to throw the whole unit out. We just want to fix that $2 thing. So we'll fix it.
Wait, so when you get the truck, nobody has told you this is the thing. We know this is the thing that's broken in it.
We have a team
not
that
the
is
truck,
core
right?
suppliers.
Well, the actual part.
Oh, sorry,
back.
like the truck full of stuff. I meant, yeah,
Exactly
in the truck full of stuff. Nobody's saying there's like 1 to 100 things in here, and here's what's wrong in the hundreds of things.
That's where the relationship with the suppliers come in, and our partners is, we're looking for this set of parts. So generally we'll have a pretty good idea of what's coming in to the manufacturing site. And that will also tell us where to send the truck as well. So I don't mean to say that it's totally random coming in. We have a very good idea, and that's part of the agreement. Hey, please send back 100 units of this core, and we get it back. And sometimes we will bill if the core is, not what we were looking for, right? And so we get down to this part where we have washed it, got all the dirt and grease off from its first life. We've separated it to understand, okay, what's broken. We've purchased that backup $2 doohickey instead of throwing the full thing away. And we'll put it back together. All right, we'll clean it once more because that process takes some time, takes some labor, a significant amount of labor. And then we will test it. And in the testing phase, we are testing for driving along in Michigan, on the icy roads, up in Alaska, driving the heat of Phoenix, wherever it's going, because you have to think it's going around the world. We have to test it so that it is as good or better than if you're buying it new. And Sabira, to your comment, well, how could it be better than new? Interesting. It's been used once by Joe Schmo. Now it's going to be used by Brian. How can it be possibly better? Okay, so when you buy an iPhone, and it says the first iPhone ever, and it comes out, and then like 3 months later, there's an update because you have some sort of glitch in the first iPhone. In the remanufacturing process, when we're testing it, we have seen we are not just testing that one product. We are testing that one product's history over the 5 years it's been on the road in the United States. And so we know there's certain failure rates in a certain type of alternator that if we can upgrade a certain part inside of it, we can actually make it better and extend its life even further than it was originally meant for. And so we're actually improving the product as we're remanufacturing it. And so that's where that term comes in.
Very fascinating. So you're saying you get a big piece of heavy equipment. One thing about that thing has failed, but because you know that there are failure rates of other things in it, and part of the remanufacturing process, you're not just fixing the thing that's broken, you're fixing the other, maybe highly probable things that might break.
Exactly right, because we have years and years of knowing that thousands of drivers have used that part, and they're coming back and, oh shoot, this part of the alternator is just not really doing great. Okay, so let's just upgrade it, and let's not worry about that on a remanufacturing.
I love that. That's so cool. It's thinking ahead. It's not being reactive. It's being proactive, and that's the differentiator.
And it's ultimately what we strive for when even in circular economy theory is the feedback loop on design of how do you actually, when you have a tight relationship with a client and a consumer, and there's opportunities to improve upon that without the emissions, that's kind of the whole point. And so that's where, there's a reality to remanufacturing that more industries should be embracing. And that now it's our job in the industry to keep chugging along and proving more and more that this is a reality that they should follow. To the future a little bit, I know that BBB has really been looking into what are the new things that the economy is to be expected on. Essentially, it's not just now car parts. There's other things in our economy that are going to start to break down and might have the potential for remanufacturing. Can you talk a little bit more about that iterative process? How does a remanufacturer see the landscape and go, oh, this is an industry we might want to serve? And then how do we go from there in terms of more remanufacturing capabilities?
Sure. Customers' demands, they always change. People will always want different modes of transportation, different ways to generate power. And so those are the two facets that we saw consumers start to make. And you see it in media. People want to start driving electric vehicles. People want to start generating power on their own outside of the grid. Okay, so then let's take a look at remanufacturing solar panels, and let's take a look at remanufacturing EV batteries. And those were the next two steps we took. It would be a shame if we had 30 years of remanufacturing experience and decided to stay in the automotive combustion industry. That would be a little bit of a shame. And so what we decided to do was use that experience, apply it to those new markets that are developing, and grow the circular economy to whatever consumers want. If consumers do choose to transition all to electric vehicles, we want to create a circular economy for electric vehicle batteries. And the same goes with solar panels.
This was the fun part about the conference that I went to, Sabira, where part of and I thought it was so well addressed. You addressed it, Jeff addressed it as well, and we might actually be able to talk to him on a podcast soon. Which is, it's the give and take of doing a circular action and reducing emissions, with the idea that it's continuing to perpetuate internal combustion engines. And it's this idea that somehow that makes it a dirtier industry. Ultimately, I don't subscribe to that. I think you all are not only doing what the economy needs, what your clients needs in terms of providing parts back to their use, but you're also then looking toward the future and saying, hey, our clients and customers aren't there yet. Or we all want to move to a direction, but still it's going to involve remanufacturing. So I loved that recognition in the conference that said, hey, the reality is we're remanufacturers. Yes, we remanufacture these things because these are what our clients need, but there's more. There's more to this to be coming in the future. And I thought that was a great line that you all had to walk on, saying, this is where we are now. This is the growth that we have ahead of us.
Yeah, exactly right. Remanufacturers, especially in the automotive industry, keep people on the road, especially when money is tight. So if you're going to the automotive store, you have to fix your car and you need a more economic option, remanufacturing comes into play. And it's unfortunate that not everyone can afford an electric vehicle, and just, okay, let's get everyone electric vehicles and stop making road emissions. Well, that's a pipe dream. Well, the least we could do is provide the offering so that people can stay on the road and get to their critical jobs, get to their kids to school, and do it in an economic friendly way, and then also have the ability in the future to duplicate our success in a cleaner form of transportation.
I love that y'all have grown beyond the automotive or the internal combustion industry and asset type. I think that speaks to the growth of remanufacturing and the adoption of that mindset overall. I'm just curious from an industry perspective, what's your hypothesis around why the OEMs aren't providing the service? If they're not, I don't know if they are. And, are you in competition with them? Why don't they just acquire BBB? Just kind of tell us a little bit about why isn't the manufacturer
dive into the super political part of this, Theo. Let's go into it.
If you feel comfortable.
Well, I will give you two reasons why we have hesitation with some of our customers. When you think about a circular economy's transportation modes, it's duplicative of just a take make waste model. You know, when I'm an OEM and I can sell somebody something, and I don't have to worry on the back end, you know, where it goes, so that saves me some money. And now, if I'm an OEM who sells a product that's supposed to be in a circular economy, well, now I have to take it back, hold on to it, and that takes up shelf space. And I also have to worry about transportation back to the person that's, say, remanufacturing the product. So that's the first one. The second one is this idea that it's always been the same way. We've always focused on price, and we've always focused on the people that we are familiar with, the new manufacturers. And so if we want to start a new project with a new OEM, and the people that are making the decisions are the people that are graded on price and what they've known and the reliability of what they know, they're going to be a little bit hesitant to try something new or to engage in the circular economy, especially if it's early on in sustainability movement and it's early on in sustainability education. Sometimes it's just not there. And so to answer your question, those are the two hesitations that we hear.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm not surprised.
And why I'm so fascinated. I mean, I had the pleasure of asking many questions at the conference, and one of those involved, you know, where do the OEMs take part in these conversations? And to the benefit of the remanufacturing industry, Theo, BBB, are catering to those organizations, or they can buy parts. But ultimately, the adoption still isn't where it needs to be. And that is the fun part, that is seeing that industry of remanufacturing, which is the willingness to grow and expand in the industry and supply that to brands, and I won't name the brands, but brands that are now saying by X date, 2030, 2050, whatever it might be, we're going to be a fully circular operation. Well, that's only going to happen through organizations that are remanufacturing right now. To your point, Sabira, and I am saying this, not Theo. To your point, Sabira, I am fascinated by who's going to acquire what, and that is going to be the big question. Is when these larger OEMs are looking to actually really put their money where their mouth is at and where their marketing's at. That's how that's going to go. Is they're going to start to supply, and they're going to start to supply in huge volume, and then the acquisitions are going to start to follow that. And it's going to be a fascinating look at. That's how we will achieve circularity, is when we fully embrace those models.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can fully separate Theo out from that theoretical conversation because he's not associated anyway with that opinion. but ultimately, I mean, it's a fascinating industry.
Well, what
any
I
other
also
question
love
to segue? Any other question to segue him out of that concept?
Yeah. Well, I love that your company BBB. That tell us a little bit, like, how did you find BBB, or are you the founder? Who's the founder? Like, who was the person who thought, 20 plus years ago that this is the thing to do? How has it evolved from being maybe just like a piece of the puzzle in the automotive world to a sustainability player? What's the company journey been like?
Sure. And this starts with the name BBB Industries. It was founded in 1987 by the Bigler family, two brothers and a dad who owned the company. And they started in rotating electric, and it was purely economically focused, where this was an economic opportunity. Now, let me take this back. Well, where did remanufacturing start? And this was out of material necessity. From what I've read online, remanufacturing started during World War II, when all the material was going to the war efforts. And we had to find a way to fix our cars stateside with the materials that were already in the car. And so that's where remanufacturing came to be. So then, to answer your question, well, how did I find BBB Industries? That's a funny story. No, I'm not the founder. I've been here at BBB Industries for 2 years now. Out of high school, I joined the Marine Corps, and I was a supply chain officer in the Marine Corps. Not officer, manager in the Marine Corps. And so after I worked in Japan, Alabama for 4 years, I went and studied supply chain management at Auburn University. And I enjoyed my time there. And in the last semester, BBB Industries came in and sponsored a project for our class focused on sustainability. And I fell in love. Our group did very well on the project, and the CEO was in the room, and I was hired, and it's history ever since. So I fell in love with remanufacturing and sustainability in remanufacturing since I found out what it was back a few years ago.
Well, that's, and I love that intro into remanufacturing too, and maybe we can do that justice too in our own intro to segue into that explanation. It's been our first, probably my first, and Sabira, our first maybe look at this was when we were working with the Defense Logistics Agency. And we were starting to look at DLA and then Defense Logistics Agency Disposition Services end, which that was almost my first understanding of, whoa, the Department of Defense has a lot of remanufacturing capabilities, has a lot of internal reuse capabilities that they're trying to focus on, mostly because of the sheer volume that they're dealing with of products and different expenses. But it's fascinating where that was my first real look into that, and then how that's been now. I think there's even a bigger market globally, and it's growing. If I may, Sabira, can you talk a little bit about, from what you all know and from what you know, Theo, on the complications? Because this is where I find it fascinating, the complications of remanufacturing and why it's not actually as internationally well known, used. Those are fascinating bits of knowledge nuggets for me on why this is so complicated. Why is this isn't growing? Why isn't this like absolutely the way this is supposed to happen across international borders?
Ooh, that's a really good question. And I think it boils down to the nature of remanufacturing itself, where instead of creating a product, you are receiving and remanufacturing. And in that process, you must have a significant emphasis on intelligence, experience, and labor. And so when we receive a truckload of core, we have to have the experience and knowledge to understand what is the product coming in. But we have over 50,000 SKUs across BBB Industries. And so for all those SKUs, the question is, well, what is it? First, that's a tough question. What is the common failure rate? And if I open it up and look at it, how do I identify that failure rate? So that's 3 or 4 questions right there that you have to answer for a large variety of products. And you think about all the cars you see on the road, and in each one of those cars is a different alternator, and any one of those alternators can come back to BBB. Well, you better have a team that is really intelligent about what alternators look like and what are the failure rates on alternators. So it's a beautiful concept, the circular economy. And for it to be globally accepted, we must understand what we already have on the road, or in any industry. We already must understand what we have. What have we already mined? What have we already made? What can possibly come back to a remanufacturer? And there needs to be a good partnership with the OEM as well.
Are you seeing one of the guests that we had on previously, Rob from Moog, has developed a way for robots and AI to kind of like store that knowledge in a way so that when the next, he works on servers, when the next server comes in the door, identifying, how to disassemble it is much easier. How, if at all, are you all thinking about amplifying that knowledge with the tools available to us with technology?
That's a good question. I very much respect artificial intelligence and its capabilities, and I think that field is growing immensely, and there's definitely going to be a future that you prescribe in your question. For right now, what is coming through the door is extremely various and extremely different from the last piece of core that came through the door. And so I have a hard time believing that we can simply move away from human intelligence until we can predict what comes through the door. Sure, it's possible. We have some very smart people in the world, and praise the Lord that we do. Have I seen it yet as a possibility? Not just yet, but maybe that's something that will be worked on shortly.
That I think that speaks to, there's such a component to service and the human component to still making circular economy happen. We talk about it all the time with Sabira, where the reality check that Sabira, we just talked about, of you going to India and seeing the circular economy happen in real time, but all with human hands. These are all services that are being operated. It's no different here in the States. It's done in defined areas, frankly, in areas probably we don't know about as much, with BBB. I didn't know about BBB. And it's like, how do we get to know more of the BBBs in the world? And where it's like, oh, they're doing the circular economy. That's actually happening in practice. And so ultimately, that's where the storytelling component comes into this. And so where I want to round this out, and Sabira, we have one more question usually with Hope. So Sabira will ask you that question, but I would love to, what are things? I mean, maybe this isn't as easy an answer as I hope, but we're limited sometimes in our time and our capacity to ask you the right question. What is the message that you try to bring most to people about remanufacturing that maybe we haven't covered today?
Well, unfortunately, we have covered it just a little bit, and it's about the quality aspect.
Yeah.
And when you think about a remanufactured product, you immediately think that someone else has used it. And for our sector specifically, that may not be a bad thing. It may be upgraded since its original manufacturer. And so to think about it differently, that is where the idea of sustainable manufacturing comes into place. Because if you're going to buy a sustainably manufactured iPhone, well, it's a little bit different than buying a refurbished or remanufactured iPhone. And so to tie remanufacturing and the circular economy to sustainability, we must start thinking about it as sustainable manufacturing. We must start thinking about it as the environmentally responsible way to purchase a product that is as good or better than its new manufacturer standard.
And sometimes, that feeling of, wow, we're really far away from the world, believing that and seeing remanufactured product as good or better than new seems really distant. What gives you hope? What in the last few years have you seen progress on that inspires you? What keeps you excited to show up every day and continue to remanufacture stuff?
Oh, that's a good question. I initially got excited and was hopeful when I saw BBB take the time to analyze its benefit for the environment. Now, I get excited as sustainability is developed. I get excited with every new corporate sustainability report that gets published by a new OEM, because more often than not, in those reports, there's a discussion about circular economy. There's a discussion about reducing our footprint. There may even be a discussion about that company being carbon neutral by 2050. All of those things are going to be the carrot in front of the horse that requires those executives or those purchasing teams to look back at what they're purchasing and understand the carbon footprint of it, and thus leading toward increased circular economy. So that it's very hopeful to me, and you'll see it in the news. It's almost in every news article every day, and every large media corporation. You'll see it more and more, and it'll continue to give me hope.
I like the message of, I think we miss it sometimes, of the power of incremental change and incremental growth, and we're getting there. And I think I've long probably gone past, and I think we'll probably deal with younger generations after us that are like, why aren't we doing more? Why aren't we doing it fast enough? And it's like, I'm already feel myself being like, look at what we have done. Like we're moving. And so I'm not going to become the pessimistic older generations also that are like, slow your horses. We have a lot to do, but ultimately I think you're right. There's incremental change happening. There's incremental growth happening. I want to say that's because of the three of us. It's because of our colleagues. It's because of these conversations that we get to have. So thank you for joining us, Theo. This is our little time that we get to have these conversations. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Our conversation today is a perfect sum of the idea that we are merging a good economic business plan with a good environmental plan as well. Coming together with a circular economy is exactly what we're aiming for. I agree with you, Garr. I'm glad we had this conversation today.
So that means we get to continue to sell circular. So there you go.
There you go. Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you, Sabira, as always, as well. Theo, we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.